Hey guys, hope you are doing well. It's Pixelade here and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So many months ago, 4 months ago I think now, EA released a statement about the Sims 4 save file corruption that left a lot of players frustrated. It was pretty vague and defensive and spent more time explaining why bugs are hard to find than actually addressing the problems players were reporting. Now since then, we've had 3 more updates, a quality of life roadmap in September, then we had a follow-up in November, and now just a few days ago, a brand new blog post that dropped this week. Now this is excluding all of the patches that did address the state of the game, but I want to focus in specifically on the quality of life roadmaps, plural. But instead of just covering this brand new update as if it were any one of my other news videos, I actually want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. What exactly did EA promise over these 4 months? And what have they delivered since then? Now, EA's communication has improved. I will give them 10s for that. But like I've mentioned many times, transparency and accountability are not the same thing. I feel like I've been grilling them very hard lately, so I definitely don't want this to come off as another one of those videos. That's why I definitely think it's important to talk about both the positives and the negatives. And one very big positive I can say straight off the bat is transparency has improved. So to understand where we are now, we need to remember where we started. Now, back in August, EA released a statement addressing for rent issues and broader save file corruption. As I've mentioned before, the tone here was pretty defensive. In the statement, they emphasized their pre-release testing process. They mentioned how mods can cause issues outside their control. They also acknowledged 6 save-related issues players were experiencing, but framed a lot of it as complexity they couldn't anticipate. So with this statement, it tracked 37 for rent issues at the time, with 26 of those being under investigation and 11 needing more information. For save corruption specifically, they listed problems like infinite loading, white screens, the error codes we have seen a lot, 800 and 801 to be specific, and also disappearing lots as well. But the explanations were rather vague. Error 801? Well, they wrote in quotes, "We've been trying to reproduce this issue internally with no success." Well, what about disappearing lots? They wrote in quotes, "We've identified a partial fix and we'll provide an update once we have more information." So, we did get transparency here with this, but we really didn't get answers. And I think for some of these issues, especially the for rent save corruption, which had already been happening for a very long time at this point, players were pretty frustrated. Now, a month later, we had a big shift in tone. The September quality of life roadmap promised action. So the headline commitment being over the next 8 weeks, dedicated teams would dive into resolving issues and getting ahead of technical disruptions. They announced a community-driven fix prioritization system where upvotes on the EA forums would directly shape which bugs got addressed. November 4th was marked as a very big day with tons of fixes based on player feedback, plus some free content for everyone. We always know they're going to do this. They also pulled forward the September 18th base game update to give more time for issue identification and mod creator preparation. Again, I gotta give them 10s there for that as well. They have been doing a lot better with helping modders prepare for major patches. So for this base game update, console players would follow then on September 23rd. So the messaging here was pretty optimistic. Again, them rating upvotes will directly shape our future updates, and them also rating your voices matter to us. So, from a player perspective, it definitely felt like EA was finally listening. But the question was whether they'd actually follow through. So November arrived, and oh boy did EA deliver with probably one of the biggest updates we have ever seen for this game. Over 150 bug fixes shipped in the November 4th update, addressing addressing many top community reported issues, this really was the update that many players who have waited several months or even years for very specific fixes actually saw those fixes in game. So it was pretty meaningful for a lot of simmers. And in November, they were more technically honest too. The November 24th blog post introduced something we hadn't seen before: actual explanations of why things break and not just acknowledgements that they break. They fixed the infinite loading issue when converting penthouses or dorms into residential rentals. And the cherry on top, it works retroactively on previous impacted saves, which not all of their fixes do. They also announced fixes coming December 2nd for error codes 109FE, 109D7, and 123B3. So named error codes with clear solutions shipping on a set date. Things really looked promising. But November's blog post also introduced something else. This was a revealing stat about why these issues are so hard to fix. I talked about this more in a previous video, and I wasn't the only one that wasn't a fan of the wording with this article. We have gotten a lot of articles like this recently. So EA wrote that there are, in quotes, more than 2.4 quintillion possible combinations of expansion packs that a player could own. They pointed out that if you spend 1 second testing each combination, it would take over 77 billion years to go through them all. And that's before game packs, stuff packs, custom content, or hardware differences. So when you think about it, virtually endless possibilities. Now, on one level, this is EA being transparent about complexity. The Sims 4 has been out for over a decade. The number of pack combinations and mod interactions, save file states, and hardware differences is absolutely massive. So, no QA team can test every scenario. And I do think EA acknowledging that is fair. But I do think there's another way to read this. When a company leads with "the math makes comprehensive testing impossible," I personally think it sounds less like transparency and more like preemptive cover. What it's essentially doing is framing the problem as inherently unsolvable before explaining what they're doing to solve it anyway. Players are asking for specific, reproducible issues to get fixed. Error 801 doesn't require testing every pack combination. It requires figuring out why multiple processes compete during load. With the other example I mentioned earlier, disappearing lots, they don't need 77 billion years of QA. They need someone to identify why protobuf data exceeds storage limits. The quintillion stat is technically true, but I also think it's a very convenient shield for them. And that tension between honest complexity and very strategic deflection, if I'm honest, seems to really run through a lot of EA's communication over the past 4 months. Again, better, but just not good enough, and it doesn't always come off in a very good way to players, specifically players that have been experiencing some of the issues we have been for several years. So protobuf overflow is the most significant technical revelation across all 4 of these updates. I did touch on this briefly in a previous video, but I want to go deeper into it here. So EA describes it as, in quotes, a situation where lot or save data grows so large it hits its storage limit. So in normal people terms, your save file or lot data can exceed what the game's data structure is designed to hold, and when that happens, lots go missing, your data gets corrupted, basically things break. Now this is different from a typical bug. A bug is essentially code doing the wrong thing that gets corrected. Protobuf overflow is a structural limit. The game's architecture has a ceiling on how complex your saves and lots can get, and when you hit that ceiling, that's when problems occur. So EA mentions that their memory boost feature, which is another new thing I've talked about recently, appears to reduce this risk on some hardware, and can even make missing lots dots reappear when loading a broken save. Now, if memory boost can recover, in quotes, missing data, that data still exists. The game just couldn't load it under normal conditions. It's worth noting though that memory boost is currently Windows only and preventative, so it doesn't work for everyone. So if you have a recent save file, or even worse, a long time legacy save, it sadly won't recover them. So the December blog post, our most recent one, doubles down on this. They've built a Python-based tool that analyzes save file structure, file size, lock complexity, and version history to spot patterns. So they're actively collecting player saves to investigate this further, and they've launched a missing lot data survey specifically targeting this issue. If you do want to contribute to this, I will have links below. Now, what they haven't said is how they plan to fix it. If this is architectural, if the game's data format has inherent limits, patching it out isn't going to be a straightforward task. So where are we at right now? All the error codes and things that have been addressed, what's been fixed, what's still hanging. So as far as fixed and shipped, the infinite loading issue with residential rental conversions, that seems to be out of the way. We have the multiple error codes 109 4FE, 109D7E, and 123B37 as of December 2nd, and also over 150 community reported bugs from the November update. Now up next, actively being worked on with details. We have the protobuf overflow investigation with the new Python tool and player save collection, error 801, which EA says involves multiple game processes competing during load, scratch file relocation from documents to app data to avoid cloud backup conflicts. This is coming in an update with a staggered rollout. Then we have complex slot behavior with cheats, mods, and move object placements. And lastly, data carryover between saves within the same session, a behavior that started with Lovestruck. People really aren't talking about this one, but this is probably one of the more important ones and widely affecting more simmers. I mean, I can bet you that you probably have more than one Sims 4 save file. Now, lastly, the ones that are still vague or without any timelines. When the protobuf issue will have an actual fix, not just ongoing investigation, whether 801 has a solution or just a workaround in progress, and lastly, how they'll address the fundamental complexity limits the protobuf's issue suggests. They do talk about the future timeline in this new blog post, and the 2026 preview, at least for early 2026, seems rather modest in my opinion. So we're looking at fixes for the flea market items disappearing and reappearing, more fixes for photos turning black and white, since our fixes for that previously were more specific. These are sadly reoccurring issues, so even if they do get fixed, we don't know if they're going to pop up, but my guess is that they likely will. Again, the scratch file relocation with staggered rollout, and continued investigation into mod data being shared via the gallery. So most of these are real quality of life improvements. Again, I'm not trying to be too harsh on them. They do matter to players experiencing those specific issues, and I'm always going to take some fixes over no fixes, but they're not the headline problems. The save corruption, error 801, and protobuf structural limits continue to remain unresolved with no fix dates in sight. The good news is that the December update does promise more updates from the team on save file investigations in January, so that is good for transparency, and again, that has been getting better. But at some point, investigation has to become resolution, and also part of me wonders if resource allocation is making this whole process happen slower. All these rumors about Project X and also Project Renee, are team members being pulled off of The Sims 4 and off of fixing The Sims 4 to work on those titles? Is that affecting, the state and quality of how content is released and how quickly we get patches, and if these major save corruption issues are ever going to get fixed, or at least fixed in a reasonable time? I say reasonable since they've been happening for several years. So I'm definitely going to keep tracking this as EA releases more updates next year. There is definitely going to be a big video if they start shipping fixes for the protobuf limits or error 801, but I do think things will be more of the same with our next update, unfortunately. But for now, I will give credit where it's due. The Sims team is being more honest now than they were in August. Let me know what you think about the change in communication from then until now. Are you personally happy with the progress we've seen? Have the recent fixes and patches improved your experience with the game, or are you still seeing issues? That's gonna be it from me for now for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care and happy life simming.